Check this out. Let's talk today about perhaps the most glorious moment in saxophone history, the presidential inauguration for Bill Clinton with 10 giant saxophonists lining up and trading short solos, which of course I've transcribed for you, so you can see what's happening there and perhaps play it on your own. But before we get started, first a disclaimer. Let's keep the focus on what an amazing gathering of top-level saxophonists this was, which was a big win for music and saxophone that day. So if you still feel the uncontrollable urge to say something political in the comments, let's say you can use a uncontroversial code word, something like Adolf. Like in sax, Adolf Sax, who was the inventor of the saxophone, of course. What were you thinking? I really respect all of these players tremendously, as they all have contributed so much to spreading saxophone joy in the world. That's the point of this video, to tie them to some of their amazing saxophone contributions. And I also would love to hear your personal ranking just for fun in the comments below. But let's get started. At 10 we have Curtis Stigers. Probably the lesser known name to the saxophonists out there, but probably the most well-known name to all the other, decent people. He probably has the least experience in playing a gazillion saxophone-centered gigs like the others, which shines a bit through in the composure. But that's all within this saxophone context, of course, as he does actually an amazing job of playing a great blues-inflected tenor sax solo. And Curtis was so kind to leave an incredible comment on this transcription video with amazing backstories to this event. Surely go and check that out. But before we go on, I need to mention that Curtis Stigers is an amazing singer, really, who can play some damn epic saxophone. You can hear both on his 1991 hit song I Wonder Why, which includes a beautiful epic alto sax solo at the beginning and the end of that tune. Listening to that, I really get nostalgic to the times that pop music was as organic as this one, where the bassist and the drummer weren't kept in chains but added own interpretations, and the singing was really full of inflection and open variation. The cherry on the cake is that incredible sounding alto sax solo, played by Curtis. So please go listen to some Curtis Stigers. His soothing voice and saxophone playing will cure anything you didn't know you had. Okay, at 9 we have Kenny G, who's like the most selling instrumentalist of all time. That's right, so not just the most selling saxophonist, no, the most selling instrumental artist overall. I mean, who doesn't know a song by Kenny G or his epic hairstyle? Kenny does here, I think, a great job with a lot of confidence, but for my taste it's a bit of a generic use of blues licks here. He starts really nice, I think, but then he gets stuck quite quickly in that vortex of the same blues lick. Yeah, we will see many more solos based mainly on the blues, which is great, but amongst all the others, I still feel like this is probably the most predictable one. By the way, shout out to those great elastic dance moves by Dave Koz there too. Of course, again, a reminder that this is just my very subjective impression, and plenty of you will place them higher on your list, so let me know. Okay, whilst I'm at it, here's a hot take on Kenny by me. For me, he sounds the best on tenor saxophone. Just check him out with Jeff Lorber in the 80s, but again, this is very subjective, of course. Next up at the 8th place we have the ultimate gospel and soul player, Kirk Whalum. Almost everybody on this planet will have heard Kirk unknowingly, unless they somehow missed that giant hit by Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. Incredible piece and a incredible soulful tenor saxophone solo. Kirk had a little whoopsie in there where he started just one round too early, coming in over Gerald Albright's solo. It's very unfortunate. I mean, as every improvising musician knows who has been training solos, it happens to all of us at some point. And Kirk is far the only one from having committed unwanted counterpoint to someone else's solo. But he is probably the only one to do it in front of the President of the United States though. Anyways, he does a nice job with a good sound and very nice control. I feel like it's not the most inventive one of all of these. That's why he isn't higher in the list, but definitely quality playing there. It's at this point that it breaks my heart to make tough choices, but I have David Sanborn at number 7. Before I tell you why, let's first pay a huge amount of respect to this absolute sax pioneer who very recently passed away aged 78 after battling cancer for nearly 6 years. He influenced pop and R&B saxophonists by pretty much inventing a new sound ideal on his saxophone. For the people who don't know yet, he has played memorable solos on recordings like with Billy Joel, Dave Bowie, Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, the list goes on. I mean, there are few who have done as much to put the saxophone in pop culture as David Sanborn. Also by being the band leader at David Letterman's show, and for me personally, he was a big contributor to the humor in the Lethal Weapon movies with his great sax runs. But back to the presidential inauguration. He was the first one to go for it and he absolutely provided that recognizable Sanborn sound. He had just a bit of bad luck that the sound engineer seemed to be asleep there and he was a bit soft in the mix. That's why it didn't slap as hard as it should have. I always love how he exaggerates the offbeat phrasing on these more chromatic jazzy lines. Listen to that. So recognizable by the mere sound of it, even blindfolded you can tell it's Sanborn in about 2 seconds. At 6 we have the father of smooth jazz, Mr. Grover Washington Jr. And is there any player who played with a more kind of relaxed, laid-back swagger than him? If you haven't heard it yet, Grover Washington Jr.'s album Wine Light is a absolute must-have for all saxophonists. Not in the least because it encloses the mega hit Just the Two of Us, but all the other tunes are like so incredibly groovy and relaxed as well. Every piece could have been a hit on there. Here he plays quite a blend of blues licks infused with some bebop type lines in his typical style on soprano sax here. And I have to say, going into these altissimos as smooth as he does on a soprano saxophone deserves a honorable mention. Right in the middle at 5 I have Tom Scott. Also a saxophone giant, but who isn't in this list by the way, for recording some iconic pop saxophone solos, like Saving All My Love For You with Whitney Houston and movie themes like Taxi Driver. Besides saxophone credits, he also has some serious writing credits for movies like Toy Story 2 amongst others. I'll be honest with you, while his note choices and lines are definitely great and nice, he moved up the ladder for me from the blues-oriented players because he did it on a friggin' sopranino saxophone and outside in the middle of winter in front of the president and millions of people watching at home. I mean, that takes, pardon my French, but some huge balls. If you're not sure why this is a big deal, imagine deciding to climb the Mount Everest, which is hard enough of a challenge, and doing that in only your underpants. Anyhow, if it's still not clear, just Google sopranino saxophone and intonation. Please, President, give this man a Medal of Honor for bravery. Gerald Albright is in the 4th spot. He's an incredible R&B saxophonist with a very particular style. Check out his playing with Phil Collins. He has some of the most heroic sax solos you'll hear out there. I was introduced as a teenager to his interpretation of Phil Collins' ballad Against All Odds in the arrangement of Quincy Jones made for the Phil Collins Big Band. It's hard to find a better pop saxophone recording than that one. If you want to check it out, it's from the album A Hot Night in Paris by the Phil Collins Big Band. What I like about Gerald here is that he dodges Kirk like a pro firstly, and he isn't affected by this happening at all. He just continues playing in his very own distinct way. To me, he has, just like David Sanborn, a very distinctive sound on the alto saxophone. Very recognizable even with a blindfold test. And he took that almost literally here by hiding his face behind this small sheet music folder there. But I see you, Gerald. One of the main saxophonists for a long time on the smooth jazz scene, although he was in this setting one of the younger upcoming players. I know him from the early performances in the 80s with Jeff Lorber, which was a certain vibe. God, I miss that hair. Why he ends so high in my personal list is because in these difficult circumstances, one of the biggest stages ever and playing outside in winter, and it doesn't seem to affect him. He is super deliberate in his note choice, great in intonation and phrasing, and his solo is more hinged than some of the previous ones, I feel like. Instead of trying to blast out as many as possible bluesy licks, this is bluesy and funky within one bigger storyline. It's all played with a lot of composure as well. If you want to hear more from Dave, check out his recent stuff, for example, with Cory Wong. Very groovy stuff. I also have a great solo of him transcribed on our channel, where he is a guest with Scary Pockets. Super nice to listen to. Gary Mulligan. He's of course the veteran on stage here, and he clearly wants to break up the pattern of all that bluesy force that came before him. He does break it up, and he does that in two ways, in two very cool ways. The most obvious one is that he quotes a tune, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Besides playing that melody quote, what stands out as well is that he plays it in a swing feel, in a heavy swing feel even. When the band comes in after that break, he adjusts the second part of the melody quote to a more straight feel. Gary Mulligan is one cool dude. I mean, literally. He was at the actual birth of the cool. He was one of the main figures in the cool jazz movement. He has beautiful cordless quartet recordings with mainly Chet Baker. Clearly a breeze of fresh air with a different approach than all of the others that came before him. finally, at the first place, and you perhaps could have guessed it if you followed the channel for a while, it's Michael Brecker. It's the ultimate saxophonist, saxophone player, and my intuition says like everybody in that stage kind of knew that, and that's why they put him last. Nobody wants to take a solo after Michael Brecker. What Brecker sets apart here is a plethora of things. While there are players that brought iconic, authentic voices to the saxophone world, like David Sanborn and Mulligan, just to pick two out of there, every of these saxophone players will respect Michael Brecker for having the incredible capacity to perform at that authentic level at any side of the musical spectrum, really. Also, as a studio cat, he was like one of the most recorded saxophonists of all time. If you need a blues or rock solo, who do you call? Michael Brecker. In need of a virtuoso jazz solo, Brecker set the standard since the 70s for all saxophonists. Need a simple pop solo that makes you cry tears? Call Brecker and he'll produce some of these iconic, memorable saxophone solos like he did on Still Crazy After All These Years by Paul Simon. A solo built on a very simple melody statement with one of the most profound ways of expression there. He could make any note sing. But all of this didn't give him this automatic pass to be in the #1 spot. It's just because he didn't give a damn. He just went all in Brecker beast mode with some of his very particular type of Breckerisms. That's what we call it, because he created them, those specific type of licks. It's hard to not be in awe of that. Just ask the lady left in the background sitting close to it and watch her face. So he starts his solo and that's just a fire blast of a run up into these false fingerings, typical Brecker licks there, to end with some of the finest blues licks like he produced, for example, while being a part of the Saturday Night Live band. It's all in there, just compressed in those 6 measures of music. He didn't really adjust to the circumstances. The circumstances bended to his unmistakable style. A style that has been copied by an army of saxophonists since mid-70s up until this day. So, that was my ranking. What is yours? Leave a comment here or go to the original transcription video. I would love your ranking and why it is where, and I hope and I'm sure we will disagree. I really just would love to know what you like in the players you have in this list. But before you go, it's a very specific list of saxophone players, and you could argue that there are some major saxophonists omitted from this. But on the other hand, it is a very impressive selection, so I wonder why they made this particular selection. My guess is that you might have a quite good insight into what Bill Clinton's favorite saxophone music was. Again, the ranking is all about taste, and we all should have limitless respect to all these players here on stage for what they have done for this incredibly beautiful instrument the saxophone is. Thank you, Adolf Sax. You're definitely the best Adolf I know. And also perhaps the best sax to ever grace this world.